Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Judy Brooks Conversation Series. And this week we are going to be listening to and asking questions of Earl Miller, who is the director of the Town of Amherst Community Responders for Equity, Safety, and Service, which is identified as CRESS. I hope I keep saying it to myself because I don't want to abbreviate and not remember all those things because all those parts are important. Before I go ahead, and I know I'm getting like redundant with this, but I want to say thank you. I saw Miss Pat's here and some other people. And Len, and I want to thank the people who have formulated all the ideas to work out all of these things that we are trying to do, because it took a tremendous amount of energy and work. And it took a lot of listening and asking questions and being here so that we can make this time possible for Amherst and possibly many other communities who will probably reflect that. So I don't want to spend any more time speaking, but the League of Women Voters and the Racial Justice Committee welcomes Mr. Earl Miller. Thank you for coming to speak to us about your program. Take it away.
Thank you all for having me. Again, not a rocket scientist, so lower those expectations just a little bit. Really glad to be here. So yeah, I'm the director of the Community Responders for Equity, Safety, and Service. And my first 3 months here, I started on March 21st. I wish I had been able to start back in October, November. I feel like I'm still trying to catch up, but for the last 2 weeks, it's felt like a real department. We have an actual team. So CRESS right now is 10 folks. Me, Kat Newman, who is our program assistant, and so much more than that. She's really important to what we do. Rome, Q, Vanessa, Brittany, Tim, Kevon, just Erica, just a wonderful group of human beings. I want to thank the folks in town who did the work to make CRESS happen. One of the great parts about this is that I got to watch you guys have those conversations, and I got to watch the town battle with these ideas. And it always feels really important to note how many communities started down this path and stopped. And they stopped for what felt to them like really good reasons, right? These conversations were tearing some communities apart. They could not figure out a way to move past the reality that racial injustice is a real thing, that it's had a very real impact on the lives of some. And I recognize the kind of grief that comes with feeling like some parts of the things that you've achieved in life came from, or at least to some part owe their success to, a lack of competition from a large percentage of our country. But you all did it. You pushed through that. And so when I started in March, we were very much in the hypothetical phase, and we've moved through that. And a lot of the CSWG ideas have really borne fruit, and some of them remain to be tested. But one of the things I really appreciate about this is the kind of great experiment of it. It's I talked to the team a lot about the idea of going into the woods together. We're not quite sure what the path looks like. We don't think it'll be safe all the time. We don't think it'll be easy, certainly, but we really want to be reflective of the community and the history of Amherst, right? I was struck at Juneteenth of the story of the 20 Black men who marched into the South, which I sometimes try to think about what that must have felt like. To leave this relatively safe community to go to a place where things didn't work out. It would not just be the end of your life, but kind of the end of the hope of your life, the hope of what it could have been. So I'll start out by just introducing myself. I'm from Holyoke, Lyman Terrace, super proud of that. I come from, I grew up in kind of housing projects and foster care and residential programs. And one of the things I hope to bring to the work is that I'm somebody who's struggled with a lot of the things that folks in town who are struggling are dealing with. I grew up in poverty. I have had mental health challenges that have been, significantly life interrupting. I was homeless in my early 20s. I lived in Forest Park for the winter. It was a rough spot to be. And I think about that time a lot. But also before I got here, I worked for the Department of Mental Health and really got to see what bureaucracies look like from the inside, and why sometimes they're so slow. And one of the things I'm really proud of is the pace we have at CRESS. We're really invested in the work. So we're talking and training folks to build relationships, and to be patient with them. To, it may take years before someone trusts us, and we're not asking people to trust us. We're committed to being trustworthy. And I think those are two different approaches to it. One kind of demands folks' expectations of you. The other one is just watch us go. And if we're trustworthy, trust us. And if we're not, please don't. Right? That's just the reality of life. So when I started, I got to go around town and have lots of really great conversations with folks. I recognize a lot of you from either events or coming to your office and sitting down with you. That was really important to me. I recognize that everybody in town has a different vision of what CRESS can be. And I recognize that we're going to disappoint some folks. There's 10 of us. I don't think we're going to be able to give 35,000 people all of their dream vision back, but we really talk a lot about values, the values we hear from folks, the idea that everybody in the community matters, even the folks who aren't, paying a lot of taxes or who maybe need more support than they're able to give back, that those folks are valuable to us, that seniors in our town deserve respect and dignity, and that everybody deserves to have a version of public safety that doesn't feel scary to them. And I'm not I'm humble enough to at least understand that for some folks in town, the PD really works for them. It feels like a safe group of folks, and they're happy to have them go. And I'm glad for those folks that what exists works, and that part of the job is easy. We just got to stay out of the way, and we'll be able to do that. But we've heard from a lot of folks that that it's scary. It's scary to, as a Black man in America. I've grown up in a country in which I've seen lots of images of folks who look like me, being really hurt. I grew up in Holyoke, and so one of the things I often talk about is the disparity in substance use kind of approaches. That when crack was raging through my community, when there were raids on a weekly basis, when people were being removed and they were taken to prison and given long sentences, they were not reformed, they were not educated, they were not made better, they were not made whole. They were just taken away, and then different people, it felt like, were sent back someday. Really harmed people. And then for those same communities to watch what happened when opiates hit the suburbs, and it was a public health concern, and why are we arresting people? And the idea that you would kick someone's door in for being a heroin user today is so foreign. These disparities are really something we think a lot about. I wish I could tell you that we had a plan for every situation, but what we know is that there are some evidence-based things that work. Harm reduction works. Criminalizing substance use. We had a conversation in class about this on Monday. The way our criminal justice system has historically treated substance users is it takes away your ability to live in your community, takes away your ability to have a job, takes away your ability to have your children. And then somehow we thought that if we took enough of your life away, someday you'd decide, well, now I'll get better, but what about after? Why would you get better if there was nothing left? And for folks who do the work, what you see is that people get to a point where they use drugs until they die because the reason to stay alive is gone, right? I think, for those of us who are parents, or even just those of us who have close relationships, losing those things and being rejected by your support structure is really hard. So, we talk a lot about how can we fill in the gaps for people who have been harmed, and how can we talk to families and communities that are supporting folks around what really works. Ideas like open dialogue in Finland, in which their crisis services really work to bring, instead of taking someone to a hospital and pulling them out of their community, they actually bring the community into the conversation. What can everybody commit to doing for this person, and how can we all help build somebody back up as opposed to tearing them down? So we think about that. We, I have two sisters who passed. I think about them a lot because they're my sisters, but also because in a lot of ways, I think their deaths were products of systems that failed them. My sister Erica had started to use substances, and the system did what it did. It took her children away, and then she used until she passed away. And my sister Adriana, who passed away when I started this job, was battling postpartum depression, and just, a young Black woman could not get a doctor to take her seriously. And ultimately it was too much for her. So we talk about these societal issues and what our approaches will be. We're training, our first training was from the Wildflower Alliance, and it was really based in how do you build relationships with people on the worst day of their lives. Part of that is not lying to people. And the lying thing, I think we think of that as telling people they're going to go somewhere and they're not going to be able to. But sometimes that lie is telling someone it's going to be okay when you don't know that it's going to be okay. Or giving someone an assurance that is likely not going to be the outcome. So being really honest with people, even if that honesty kind of hurts to deliver, but being clear with people that if we know something is about to happen, that we share it with them, that we're honest with them, and that we support them through it, wherever that may take us. For folks of color in the community, I think there's been a lot of thought of how we'll approach them. And, when I was at the Department of Mental Health, we did an REI process, and it was at the beginning kind of a large system telling people to trust us, particularly folks of color who worked there, and there weren't many. I was one of 4 Black men in management in the state. And so there weren't a lot of folks. And the first thing they tried was to say, well, show up to a meeting and trust us. And it was an affinity group. And if you showed up to that meeting, what you would have seen was this space that was going to be just for folks of color ended up being about half white folks. And their intentions were good, but it immediately kind of ruined the ability for folks to trust. You said this space was just for us, and yet kind of here we are. And we really worked to develop an approach that was, instead of kind of trying to bait people to join a process, having a process that was so transparent that people could see what it was doing and that they could see why it was worth trusting. I say that to say that's really what we're trying to do with CRESS. We want folks to come down and see our training. We want folks to see what we're doing. In the fall, we're going to do more events at the apartment complexes and in neighborhoods to really say we're here. And CRESS doesn't have to be an idea. It can be Earl, it can be Erica, it can be Kevon, it can be a real person who cares about you and is willing to put in the work to be supportive. I could talk, I do talk about this all day. I wake up at about 5:30 in the morning. I probably talk about this from 7 till about now. There's a lot of really tricky pieces to this, right? We are going to be the first department this side of Camden, New Jersey to stand up. We'll be the first in New England. We will be the first of this type where we are an entire public safety department that we can find in the country, that we are a kind of separate but co-equal branch of public safety. There isn't a roadmap for that. And you would be surprised. Maybe you wouldn't be surprised. I shouldn't say that, but I find myself surprised often by how many, me and a firefighter today, we're talking about policy that was written 35 years ago about liability and transferring cases and how could we surmount that. And the kind of the really in the weeds pieces of this are challenging. I just want to note that one of the real strengths of CRESS is that we do have the support of a variety of different stakeholders in the community. The CSWG folks, I think they are the roots of what we're doing, obviously, right? If those folks hadn't kept that conversation going, if they hadn't fought those battles, I don't know how we would have gotten here. But also, it's worth noting that a lot of these processes were stopped by obstructionist police departments, and we are not facing that. Does everybody feel confident and comfortable with us? No, we're a brand new thing. But folks have really, I think, tried to be supportive. And also being willing to talk about discomfort. Today, the CRESS responders started getting a tour of the police department and the fire departments. And we had some really challenging conversations in there, some really specific conversations. some folks who had felt harmed. And one of the things I was really appreciative of was Gabe Ting being willing to hear those things. Like there wasn't this, no, we would never do that. It could never have gone that way. People were open to hearing the harms that had been done to folks and apologizing for them and committing to shifting those things and having deeper conversations. In the fire department, I'm sure they don't know what to make of us. We will be, of just a spoiler, of no help in putting out fires. I don't know how to do it. I'm not even going to give it much of a go. But they let us use their van today. They've been really generous with their resources, and that's meant a lot. And then other groups I've been really heartened are by the schools, the administration of the schools, who have been really humble and understanding that public safety is important, and that how we interact with the schools may be different. That we want to make sure that we're treating every citizen like they're worthy of dignity and respect. So, when we talk to kids, we want to make sure that we do it in a way that isn't kind of top down. You have to respect me because I have a name tag or a badge that says you have to. And we're still talking to parents in the community about how would you want us to interact with your kids? What should we do? Where we are now is that, if we run into kids who are in trouble, we, similar to that open dialogue thing, want to have a conversation with their families. We want to bring them back to their community, right? The people who are responsible for and to them, and have those conversations about what doesn't work and what works. And we believe that'll lead to sustainable change. If behavior isn't working, that kind of, as opposed to trying to punish it away, saying it. And I hope that'll work. Again, this is all very much an experiment. So like I'll give you my my big disclosure, like my big coverall before I take questions. Every Friday, I think since I started, I would describe CRESS a little bit differently. We get new information. Now we have people. When I got the job, Alicia Walker, I very much appreciate this and think about this a lot. I listened to the whole thing after they said I got the job, and then I stuck around to see what they said afterwards. And what she said was that this felt like I was holding her baby. She had put a lot of work into this, and that I think about that a lot. That while I get to be the director of CRESS, this is an attempt to build an institution, and we haven't done that in a very, very long time for a lot of reasons. It's not easy. It's not going to happen overnight. What CRESS looks like in 5 years is not what it'll look like when we start. So every Friday, I think of it a little bit differently, and I think that's one of one of the things that's going to make us good, is that this thing is flexible enough to meet the needs of the community, and honest enough to say that we won't be able to solve every problem alone. It'll only happen in the context of making all of Amherst feel like they're involved with us, and that when we get resources, we're sharing them with folks in a way that feels equitable. An example of that is we have some money for engagement, and we very intentionally made a point of spending that money first in apartment complexes that were still affordable, that still had large family units in them. Not that we don't want to talk to students, but those are the people who don't often get to have these conversations first. They don't often get to have these conversations while something's coming together. And we learned a whole bunch from it, from playing games with kids at one apartment complex, to learning about the community garden at another, to frankly hearing stories of folks feeling concerned when police were outside of their building and they didn't understand why, and then having a conversation with them about how they could learn what was happening and who they could call to find out why anybody was outside of their house, because that's something everybody should have, right? If there's someone in an emergency vehicle outside of your house, you should know that it's not you, that the emergency isn't at your house, and that you're okay. So, building trust between folks. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Paul Bockelman's leadership. He is not a micromanager, which is maybe the kindest thing I can say about a human being. He really allows us to do the work, and he has this really, if you haven't had the chance to run a problem by him, he has this wonderful way of answering a question with a question that makes you that circles it back to you, right? You guys trust me to do this, and he's not going to let me take a shortcut, right? There's nobody to go to but the work. And so I've felt really supported. We're early in this. There are going to be some hiccups. I also wanted to say we're going to fail. We may fail more than we succeed at the beginning, but we just had a conversation before we sent the responders home today about, when they fail, I expect them to fail in the direction of helping folks. I expect them to fail in the direction of compassion, and I think they felt like that was what we should do. So that's what we will do. I will not get any more into the weeds with you all. I'm interested in hearing questions, thoughts, anything you folks have. Oh, Alice, yeah, I see your hand up.
Hi, yes. You spoke about a class and about training. Could you explain more about those?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
I think it's probably the same thing, but
So I
yeah.
think you all saw in the paper, we swore folks in the day after the 4th, and that was important because now we have a birthday, right? July 5th every year will be, that's the marker, right? If we can make it through this year, then we got a fighting chance next one. So that was the fun part, and then we have to send them into a class. And so they spent the next 5 days in the classroom. We're at the Munson Library, which I just think is such a beautiful space. I think there's something important about kind of being in the community, doing this training kind of in Amherst, but in a part that people maybe don't spend a whole bunch of time in. So we're at the Munson Library in that bottom floor because that's where you can get some airflow. It's hot upstairs. They have a pretty rigorous 2 months ahead of them, another 6 weeks and 2 days left. We have the Wildflower Alliance, formerly known as the Western Mass RLC. They came in and did the first 5 days on hearing voices, ways of navigating people who are feeling suicidal that doesn't kind of take away their autonomy, but instead kind of empowers them to think of ways to find some value in the moment, or sometimes just to endure the pain of the moment. They have motivational interviewing next week, a really kind of rigorous, they're getting, if you know MI, and MI is in the weeds thing, there's a kind of basics and an intensive one. They're getting both of those in these 8 weeks. They're doing the basic at the beginning, the intensive towards the end, because motivational interviewing is really about how do you stay curious with people when they're in crisis moments? How do you keep asking questions? How do you stay engaged? And how do you keep building the relationship even when it's challenging? It's a modality that I think makes a lot of sense. And then we're doing NVC, nonviolent communication, which is being delivered by folks from the town. We really did put a priority on getting as much training as we could from folks. We also have some training coming from Hampshire College on LGBTQ folks, racism inside and outside of Black communities, so kind of African American racism, but also the experiences of folks who came from Cambodia, Vietnam, South America, the ways in which kind of American foreign policy impacted them, and really giving folks an opportunity to see the wider impacts of lots of things on folks. And then we're still building out some other pieces. We have, they're doing ride-alongs with the PD, they're doing ride-alongs with the fire department, although again, not putting out fires. I want to assure you, we are staying out of the firefighting business. They're going to do some days of service before they start, where they're going to go work at some of the nonprofits, Craig's Door, just because I have really learned the value of sweat equity, right? Going to a place and putting in some work and getting an appreciation for what that looks like for folks. As well as several tours of the town. We're going to neighborhoods. Today we were, I forget the name of it. We were on a street that kind of bordered the college, but not Faring Street, talking with folks about their experiences there and what they really needed from us. So how did they want us to approach college students when they had conflict? Just learning from folks, and Bill Laramie led that. And as much as possible, we really want to make sure we're learning from people who have lived experience with these challenges, that we're putting, we've asked every trainer who comes there to speak to racial equity in the context of their topic, and when and where kind of discrimination or barriers have been put up for communities that have been ignored for a large time by systems. So, it's been challenging for the trainers. We also have some executive coaching. So recognizing that I, as a director, also need to be trained during this period. so that when people come in and do trainings, it's not just kind of left in the ether. They're also telling me, how do I supervise folks that allows them to keep doing this work? What policies do we need to have? What are the kind of very real things that I can do to ensure that they can be successful? So I want to assure you that it's not just the responders getting trained. I'm learning every day and humbled every day.
Does anybody, if you have a question, put the little reaction thing with your hand up so that, you know, I don't know. Okay, Sue.
Hi, Sue.
Sue Lowry, Chad after her.
Hi, Earl. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. I've done a lot of work both at the Survival Center and at Craig's Doors over the years. And one of the things that I worry about for people in the field is burnout and compassion fatigue. And I wonder what kinds of things you plan to have in place to both monitor that as well as supporting people so that, you know, hopefully we can avoid much of it.
That's a fantastic question. I don't have a clear cut yes or no. If I was able to solve that, I think I'd be more valuable to the world than maybe I'd be as valuable as a rocket scientist. But really, what we've talked about with them is, you know, today when they left, making sure that you have a life outside of work. When we're putting together schedules right now, we're looking at 4 days on, 3 days off, really so that folks have extra time to have a social life, right? A day to decompress and then days to do the things you need to. We spend, so one of the very first things they got was just a conversation on, our job is not to solve people's problems. Our job is to support people to have the tools to solve their own problems. That ultimately, you know, we are going to do our best, and our job really isn't to, I believe in this kind of idea of recovery, that folks have the right to live in the least restrictive setting of their ability, where they can be successful. And so, you know, our job is to support people to live the lives of their choosing, and that sometimes may mean we disagree with them. It sometimes may mean that people don't choose the path we lay out for them. We're through training, they're going to get a lot of we're going to show them all the good hiking spots in Amherst. We're having folks come in to talk about kind of yoga and breathing. I talk a lot about breathing. Sometimes when you don't know what to do with anything, the only thing you can do is take a deep breath and figure it out and just kind of get through the moment. And you know, the other thing I really believe in is kind of compassionate supervision. And right now I'm also the only supervisor. So we already started the process of talking to folks about what's coming up for them during the training. And it's intense, right? I think sometimes the thing people don't think about is, and I saw this a lot with clinicians when I worked for DMH, was sometimes when you're hearing other people describe their stories, sometimes they just happen to tell yours. And that can be really, really hard. And with, you know, not many days under their belt, that's happening for folks. They're hearing about things that are bringing things up for themselves, and talking to them about, you know, how do we help you to overcome this? And the other piece that I think is really important is that they work in pairs. I think that was really, really smart of the CSWG. It was absolutely a CSWG recommendation that made a lot of sense. And we've told them from day one, some days are not going to be your day. Someday you're going to be the helper. And some days your partner is going to be the person doing the work. And that's okay. And we've also really talked about them being supported, having conversations with their partner about, hey, what are you doing for yourself? What do you need? And we'll continue to. The reality, though, is that it's almost certainly that some of them will burn themselves out. I've experienced burnout at several points in my career, and encouraging folks that, like, I think for some people, I really hope for some people, CRESS is going to be the career, right? I hope that some of the folks we hire in are going to spend their whole lives with us, and they're going to retire and maybe get a nice house with a nice view in Amherst and just enjoy that. But for some of them, they're going to give what they can as long as they can, and they're going to go do something else. And I've been really clear with them. I want to support them if that comes up too. Paul Bockelman told me something that I've shared with them, which is if you find yourself driving in here and everything in you is telling you to go somewhere else, let's talk. Let's talk. Let's figure out what we can do, because the work is hard. It's hard even if you really, really want to do it. And it's impossible if you want to do it and you just can't. So being transparent with them and knowing that as much as you tell people not to run themselves too hard, that's the hard part about doing human work, is it's passionate. They're going to really, my career has, I've learned that sometimes you really, really think you help somebody, you really, really love them, and it ends poorly. During the opiate epidemic, at the beginning of it, I ran a center in Springfield, and one summer, 20 folks who came in our center died. And it felt like I was spending more time at funerals than I was at work. And what got me through was, well, maybe I can help 21, maybe I can help 22, maybe I can make a difference, and maybe I help them stay around a little bit longer. But I also think, I don't think there's anything else in the world I'm gonna do. So that's not gonna be true for everybody else, and being okay with this being a season in someone's life versus the entirety of it. That's a really great question, and please ask me that again in 6 months and see if I have a better answer.
Okay, Chad has a question. I think you were next, Chad. Unmute.
Hi, thanks for talking to me today, Earl. I see you as a peace officer, somebody who brings peace into the neighborhood. And a fellow who's the chief judge, jury, and sentencer, a cop, brings chaos often to a neighborhood. I don't care which social strata we're talking about, mental health strata, or any of that. So I'm hoping you have some type of, I don't know if you call it program, that does mediation, whether it's mediation on the street corner, or when tempers, the fight or flight diminish, mandated to mediation in an office somewhere. Will you folks receive training in mediation?
Yeah, so that's a good easy one. Yes, they're doing restorative justice training. They're doing several of them. They're doing group processes, circle work, which I really believe in. I think there's something important about sitting in the same room and just seeing what experiences we're all having and trying to come to a consensus. They're getting one-to-one restorative justice. And in fact, one of our best candidate, Chalo, has done work in Kenya and is teaching a lot of us about, he ran a program in Kenya in which they worked with men who had been incarcerated to help them to support their families. So a job program in which they were able to send money home, but also to bring their families and to have conversations about what does our family look like after this. I believe in redemption every day for everyone. And I certainly hope to never be judged by my worst day. And I don't plan to judge anybody by theirs.
Thank you, Chad. Cynthia, unmute.
Muting. Okay, Earl, I haven't met you yet, and I'm sorry I haven't. But I want to tell you something just from my heart, even though we're sitting here on a screen. You have such a beautiful way of communicating. I would do anything you asked me. You're so open, transparent, loving, and I'm so glad we have you. It's just astounding. And I'd like to ask you, how are you going to be working with the police? I mean, is that going to be a joint relationship, or have you separated what you're going to be doing and so forth?
So that's a fantastic question. I think that is often the question. So I want to start by just saying we want to be able to give folks what they want. So for members of the community who just want a CRESS response, where we already have a phone line where they can call us and we can self-deploy. We're working really as much as possible to develop connections. We were at the Survival Center lunch today, and we got a lot of phone numbers from folks who said, hey, I want to be able to call you when something comes up. I don't even want to have to worry about 911. And so I just want to say that for folks who are interested in just contacting us, we want to make sure they have the ability to. With the PD, some of it is right now where we are is making sure that our folks just understand what they see as their role, what they see as the expectation. We aren't going to be doing kind of co-responses. So what you should expect to not see is a CRESS person come out of a police car. That's something that we're just on neither side of that equation are we interested in. We're co-equal branches. You also don't see a firefighter come out of a police car. But there is potential that there could be parallel responses. I think we've been thinking about like what deployments could look like in 3 ways. 911, and in those, there's the real, we will do some of those 911 responses alone. There is the option for assist, which is I think where you'll see us mostly work alongside the PD and the fire department, which is when they show up for a mental health related call or a dispute and they've done their thing. They've done the thing that they're there to do. Someone's not going to be arrested. Someone is going to be arrested. One of the things I'm really aware of, and I saw it happen a lot when I was growing up, is you would watch domestic violence things happen, and they happened a lot where I lived. And the police would come and they would pull the father out of the family, and then that was it. And then we all pretended like we didn't just destroy this family, even if it was dysfunctional, even if it didn't work. And so, we think in those situations, showing up and having a conversation with the victim and talking about what supports they need the next day. One of the situations that came up before the responders came was there was a family that was having some issues at a bus stop, and it was 5 days left in the school year, and this was really making it hard. So me and my program assistant drove the kid to school for 5 days. It's not a huge thing. We were already going to be in town, but it made life easier for folks. So those sorts of things where we can kind of provide a longer support for folks and still address the issues that remain after the legal process has ended. Same thing with the fire department, right? After a fire or a medical incident, there's still a real trauma that's happened. And being there to support people and realizing that kind of nobody ever wakes up and thinks the municipal government is going to come solve my problems today. That every one of those interventions comes at a cost. And I hear often from the PD and the fire department, they meet people on the worst day of their lives. And so being really committed to helping transition the worst day of your life into the start of something. That's what my career is, right? I started in human services as a 24-year-old dad who couldn't get a job at the Dunkin' Donuts on Main Street in Springfield, and then who knows, it really worked out in the end. But being there to be supportive for folks and being flexible enough that support can look really different depending on what folks are talking about. And yeah, referrals are something we're really looking into, but also not just being referrals, but really warm handoffs, right? I don't think this is maybe where it is like rocket science. The way that human services work is complicated. I ran a housing program in Springfield in which we were able to house over 100 people. And the way we were able to do that was by knowing that if you go to HAP on Monday, the receptionist is usually not that kind. She had to come back to work after the weekend. But if you go on Thursday, she's pretty great. And so getting to know the services on a really intimate level so that we can make them function for people. Developing relationships with landlords in which the conversation wasn't, do I want someone with a mental health condition, or do I want somebody with no supports, or do I want somebody with a lot of supports? And building the relationships in which, people trusted me enough that if I said, hey, I think this person would be a really good fit, they were willing to take a risk on folks. And we did that with no state funding. There's a lot that can happen in the context of relations that can look similar to what the behavioral health systems or systems of care, right? That's also the homeless system. It's the disability system. It's all of these things that happen in our lives that are meaningful, helping to be a good guide for folks, helping to be a good, I'm a peer specialist by trade, right? and one of the really important things of that is not just being able to tell someone I've been there before, but to walk them down that path and help them avoid some of the scary parts. So yeah, I'm really excited for that stuff. And I think, you know, this is something I couldn't do talk about all the time. And the great part is we're having conversations with all the providers, even the providers who aren't going to be kind of contracted to work with us, about what the impact on our services will look like. We'll have the DMH forensics director at our training. The DMH area director will be there on Friday, my former boss. We'll have folks from BSAS and DDS and DCF, all these folks who, you know, and it's not just about them telling us what's going to happen, but us saying, hey, this is the way we can work with you that feels like it holds to the values we're expected to hold. And we do, you know, we recognize that this community expects us to behave a certain way, and we intend to meet that. Sorry if that was another in the weeds answer, but this is my,
Okay.
yeah.
A comment from Ms. Pat on the Baku? Or a question?
Hi, everyone. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I was part of CSWG, and I'm very excited and happy that the CRESS program is up and running with the trainings. And I thank you all for all your energy, all the time that you give, you know, speaking to different groups and everything. I do want to bring up a recent video that has surfaced on social media on July 4th, when our wonderful responders were sworn in. 9 hours later, some Amherst police officers mistreated and harassed 10 teenagers, most of whom are BIPOC kids. So my question for you is, what is the plan moving forward in terms of who is going to be handling noise complaint? Because part of the reason why CSWG really pushed for CRESS program is to prevent incident that happened on July 4th. And we have not heard anything from the administration. There is no accountability, and this is not okay. So I'll stop there. I do have another follow-up question after this.
Yeah, so I you know, sorry, this is maybe where I put my state hat on. This is going to be half of an unsatisfying answer. So I just want to apologize at the beginning. We're still in training, so I don't want to second guess folks when I can't deliver any alternatives. What I do know is that as we go live, which we expect to be the last week of August or the first week of September, depending on a couple pieces, that we do intend to respond to those calls. That we have viewed lots of local videos of incidents. I don't want to speak to this one kind of directly because I don't know that it helps much I don't know. I don't feel comfortable based on not being able to do anything in this one. But you know, we do have a sense of how we would do those things. And today we were in some of the neighborhoods really kind of mocking up that. We are taking a lot of incidents, and I encourage you folks, if you have situations that have occurred in town, send them to us. We're looking for scenarios to drill on, so that we can really practice how do we respond to these things. But working with young folks is actually the passion of a lot of folks on our team. And my approach, again, just to reiterate, is always to bring challenges back to families, particularly with young folks. There's this idea in human services that one of the really important things is to keep the family at the center of these things. Because ultimately it's not just that they're the solution, but this is their human being. This is the person they love, the person that loves them. And you know, I have a daughter, and I hope that, you know, she never ends up in a situation that feels dangerous. And I hope that the folks who do show up, if she makes a lot of noise, are compassionate and caring and empathetic. And I know that as of us going live, that'll be true in Amherst. To the obviously, I just want to say we'll be somewhat limited. There's only 10 of us, but we'll do our best to get to all of those things. And that's also true. There's been questions of, will we work with college students who live in town? The answer to all of those is yes. I see all residents of this town as kind of equal and deserving of impactful work from CRESS. So sorry for that half of the unsatisfying answer. I want to make sure that I don't speak out of turn. And I think the PD certainly can speak for itself. But yeah, we do think that we will have a role. We recognize the CSWG asked us to have a role in noise complaints, as well as things like loitering, homelessness, all sorts of kind of nuisance calls, in addition to the 911 calls. And we are training and developing a capacity for those situations that we think will be meaningful.
Thank you.
And a
My
follow-up
next,
question?
can I ask one more
Yeah,
question?
yeah.
Okay, very quickly. So, as you know, during summer it's very, very quiet. Students will soon be coming back. CSWG advocated very strongly to fully fund CRESS program. And I cannot speak for other CSWG members, but for myself, I feel extremely nervous for the manpower that we have right now, only 8 responders to cover 24/7. I don't know how that is going to happen. Has there been any discussion about increasing the funding after free cash?
So this is my first budget season with the town, so a lot of this is new to me. I know that there will be conversations before November about, every department makes its kind of asks known, and certainly we have a lot of room to grow. It would be nice to have some supervisors. There's lots of things we'd like to do. One of the reasons I took this job in Amherst is because the community can speak for itself. You all, when you want to be heard, have an amazing ability to be heard. So it's not my place. My role is whatever resources I'm given to make the best of it. And kind of my attitude towards these things is, if we can do what we can do with 10 people, we'll be able to double with more. We'll build capacity, but I certainly think we all believe there's room to grow. I encourage folks who believe that to use the things available to you as residents to make your voices heard. And you don't need me to tell you whether or not CRESS should be big or small or more or less. You tell us what you think, and you talk to your representatives, and they'll let me know. Here's what I know is that as much as things can grow, they can shrink, and I trust the folks above me, and yeah, I that again, unsatisfying answer. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna one of them will really be good, but yeah, it's kind of not my place to talk about the budget. But if we had just one-to-one, if we had more, we could do more. But I think we'll get a lot done with what we have, and I hope you guys make us earn it. I hope you make us give you work that's impactful, that deserves more resources. And I think one of the things that's happened is sometimes we can get like as a culture, big reactions to things, and I do think there's some value in training the amount of people we have. I think they're getting a really intimate training. I'm thinking about it like the fire department. When people leave the fire department, they go to be chiefs other places. And I'm committed to when people leave CRESS, I'm counting on some of them going to direct programs like ours, other places. So I appreciate the time I've gotten to spend with folks. And boy, that was a tight rope I walked there. I hope I stayed on. I did my best. If I fell off a little bit, I'm sorry. But yeah, with more we can grow, and we're committed to doing absolutely everything we can with what we got. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you.
Miss Kathleen.
Yes, yes. Welcome to Amherst, Earl. Three things. The first thing I wanted to mention is Eric Buford at the high school at Amherst Schools, who's working in restorative justice. And it would be a good idea, if you haven't already, to interact with him. And each of you could give each other's support with the students.
That's a great one. We've met, we like each other. We did some Zoom and stuff. I know he's on summer vacation now, but we have some plans when he comes back to regroup, and I respect him a whole bunch. He's a guy who has a whole lot to teach me. And if I'm lucky enough to teach him something, I'll be pretty proud of myself. But he's somebody I think of as a really key stakeholder for us, and his vision of restorative justice really does line up with my worldview, which isn't always true, but it's nice when it happens. So thanks for giving me one that I could give a good answer to.
All right. The other thing is, you mentioned training, that your group is going through training. I hope that you are anticipating ongoing training, not just once at the beginning of their work life, but ongoing on a regular basis. It's a necessary element to include in any workplace,
Kathleen, they're going to think,
particularly this kind of work.
Kathleen, they're going to think I paid you. Absolutely. Everybody we have in our training, we've already asked them to have a plan for the second step of training. And as we're thinking about schedules, we're thinking about in-service days, career development. How do we make sure that people get a chance to shadow each other and see each other? I believe deeply in training. I think your career is over the second you think you figured it all out. I've never seen anybody say, I got this, who had a next good year. So the thing I know is that as long as we're doing this, and as far as themes, that is something that like the fire department and police department do. They do a significant amount of training. So we actually talked about that during interviews, that, you know, coming here meant a commitment to growth, that coming here meant a commitment to learning, and a humility about that, right? The one thing we know is what we don't know, which is most stuff. So absolutely, Kathleen, that's something I think about all the time. And we're being clear with our trainers that we don't want them to, we want to have consistent trainings, and we want them to come in and meet with us in between trainings to talk about what we're doing and to make sure that, you know, we're staying on top. For example, with MI, we have the 2 trainings that are happening during this. We also have the same trainer contracted to do practice sessions, which is, if you've done MI, is really important to have the practical practice sessions.
Did you define MI for the people who don't know?
Yeah. So it's opportunities to talk through the challenges you're having, to get feedback from the group around you, to do some scenarios and some role playing. Really, it's like working out. MI is a thing you have to really kind of focus. So we have our trainer coming back on a bi-monthly basis. And in fact, one of the people we hired will be able to do the practice in between, so that they have a session that's just responders. So yeah, I absolutely, training is the most important thing, especially with something developing like we are.
Okay, so then the final thing I want to say is to offer you a suggestion. And that is that even though your team may not be fully in their work world, you are fully in your work world. And it would be a good opportunity to go have a conversation with the chief of police about the July 4th incident with the students.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Martha, unmute.
Yes, well, thank you very much for coming to this and so on. And I was impressed with your comments about going to a scene where there'd been the police or say the EMT or something, and doing follow-up. I had a conversation this past week with someone who works for the fire department, and mainly the medical ambulance team and so on, in the large city of Tacoma out here, stressing the importance of, you go to, a lot of people are really so scared of the health system that say you're called and you have to take somebody to the emergency room. What about the family? They don't know what's going to happen, or, now what? How do they contact, and to have somebody come in and be able to describe what happens in an emergency room, what are the procedures, how can you go visit, and all that is really helpful, I think. And so I'm glad that that's on your radar there. But then I just wanted to ask you a personal question, maybe. I've been so impressed with you the past 3 months. You've come in, with such enthusiasm and trying to get acquainted with everybody and everything that's going on. what do you do to prevent burnout? What do you do? And do you take time off? And what do you enjoy doing for a hobby or something
If I open this door up, you could hear The Simpsons. My 11-year-old is sitting in there, and that's a big part of it. I'm a single dad. You know, when I share custody with her mom. So when she's here, when I'm with her, I don't answer my phone as much, right? Unless it's an emergency. I make sure that I have a dog. His name's Coco. If you've been on a Zoom with me in the last few months, you've seen him. I have a cat. The thing about this is, for me, this work is, I think, closer to what folks in AA talk about. Like, this is the thing that keeps me well. Thinking about this stuff is for me is like, this is my job, but if, you know, don't tell anybody, but if they took away the money, I'd still do things like this. This is the stuff that feeds my soul. So I'm really lucky in that, you know, I know not enough people in this country get to do what they love for $1. And I do. And so I appreciate that. As far as fun, I like music. I used to do some poetry pre-pandemic. I read a lot. I just got done reading a book on written by a hospice worker about her experiences kind of supporting people to pass on. And, you know, I like talking to people. I feel like most spiritual when I'm with people. I feel most connected. I spent a lot of my youth in like very isolating spaces, in like residential programs and in places where I felt like I would be alone forever. And so, you know, like tonight, right? 23 of you showed up to have a conversation with me. This will carry me through some hard spots, right? Because you could have been doing anything. So I'm one of the luckiest guys. I have beautiful, healthy children. I have pets that aren't too annoying. They stopped eating shoes, so we're in a good place. And one of my new favorite things is sometimes I go up to Amherst and there's so many places to just like lay in the grass. And I don't know that I could ever be happier than just kind of laying in the grass with a book. So I'm a pretty simple guy. I don't have a lot of frills. I didn't think I would live to be this old. I certainly didn't ever think I'd get to live this kind of life. And so I don't know if there's a heaven after this, but I think I might have got the closest I could have thought to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We're all cheering you on, Earl. So you just take good care of yourself while you're caring for everyone else.
Good advice, Martha. Very good advice. Michael, your question?
Yes. Hi, Earl. We did a Zoom meeting some weeks ago. I'm up in Pelham. We're looking to see what we might be able to adopt or connect with the CRESS program in Amherst. My question is about the relationship and the training that's going on with the dispatcher. And if you could speak to how that is being done, and also when you are dispatched, about whether you will be going out independent of people from the PD or with the PD, and what those numbers will look like. I know that you're working in teams, so I don't know whether the PD always sends 2 people out on a call as well. So what would that look like? Would 4 people be showing up, you know, on a call? So if you could just talk to that issue of the dispatcher, because that seems to be a pretty critical link in this whole project.
There is a lot of make or break points in this, but dispatch is a significant one. We are incredibly fortunate to have Mike Curtin. I know folks don't often get to see him because he's kind of like Batman. He's up in that dispatch office all the time. So one of the things I learned from other communities that had started this was that dispatch, I was talking to someone in Denver who was saying, you know, kind of they wish they had like let dispatch own some of the technology so that they felt like there was more room to have conversation about the deployment. So we made a really intentional effort to just kind of say to dispatch, like, this is the sort of system we need. We need it to be, I felt really insistent that if you've done social work, having a phone these days is very key to be able to look up resources with someone, to be able to connect them to the things. So our dispatch system actually looks like a Nextel Chirp, but like a 2022 version of it. which I love because I didn't want us walking around with like anything that looked like what people expected law enforcement to look like. And so our folks would be carrying around cell phones. As far as deployments, we are talking about a team of 2 going out, and the vast majority of those things being them going out to a situation and doing it themselves. There are some situations we're really working through a flow with folks. Obviously, if you show up and someone is in medical distress, we will have some first aid training, but we would want to get an EMT there. And that's not uncommon, actually, right? That someone feels like they're having a mental health thing, but it's connected to a physical health thing. I have bad asthma. The last time I got really sick, I thought I was having a panic attack. Actually, I had pneumonia. Same thing of not being able to breathe well. And with the PD, similarly, I think the way we're looking with dispatch is being really clear. Our calls are the ones that are not violent, right? We are unarmed, so we wouldn't be well equipped to get into a fight. And kind of not major crimes, right? Obviously, loitering is a crime in some places, but so I think at the beginning, what you might expect is it to be a little low and slow with dispatch. That dispatch is going to be really tactful. Part of that is I want folks to get some successes. So we may send, 2 groups of responders out to kind of work with each other as they're still learning. But ideally, my hope is that with 2 responders, we're able to take most of our calls. And I know this is a really scary thing for folks to think about, but it's important to know that in cahoots, which is the kind of largest national model of this, the average is less than 2% of calls needing police reinforcement. With Denver and the STAR program, they have never in their 3-year history needed to call the police, and they're going to double the amount of calls they take this year. I think sometimes we underestimate what unarmed de-escalation can do. A conversation I've had with lots of parents in this community, obviously after what happened in Uvalde, is, school safety. It's important to note that there's only been one example in the history of this country in which a school shooting was stopped before a loss of life by an officer. But 20% of them were stopped by unarmed people in the school. There is a huge evidence base that's existed for years that when calm is contagious, right? Positivity is contagious. And one of the most important things I tell the responders is when you show up somewhere, tell folks you got their back, right? If I got your back, whether it takes an hour to get us through this or it takes a year. I'm committed to doing the things to help you navigate this. And I ran a center in downtown Springfield near the McDonald's in the South End. The McDonald's averaged 300 911 calls a year. Hap Housing next to us had over 100. We never called 911 in the entire 4 years I ran that center. Not because I'm a superhero, but because, I think de-escalation doesn't always have to look fancy. Sometimes when people would show up yelling in the morning, you'd say, it's 9 o'clock on a Thursday. How do we get to 10, right? How do we just survive this moment? Like, one of my favorite things is, hey, you can't be that mad at me. I don't even know you that well. Give it some time, right? We can get there. But like really reminding folks and grounding them in the moment. And a lot of that is that being trustworthy piece. So I'm talking the art part of it. The LEAP report, which is one of our kind of founding documents, looks at somewhere between, they landed at about 20% with the idea that could grow. 20% of the calls in town currently are calls that do not rise to the level of a fire or police response and yet get one because they've come through the 911 system. We anticipate that we will be able to take that 20% of calls. And I don't go into anything thinking we won't be able to grow what we can do. So I think 20% is what the LEAP report calls for, and talk to me in 5 years and see if we don't really surprise you with that. I think, and one of the great parts about that is the conversation with the PD and the fire department isn't about who gets to do what. We also at some point need to have a conversation about when we decided that the police were going to be responsible for every social ill. Because what happened was we just piled it all on top of them. So we kind of the way we're framing it for them is, hey, imagine 20% less calls. Nobody's unhappy to have 20% of the volume of work pulled away, especially by folks who are enthusiastic and happy to do it. So we think will be a force multiplier for everyone, and everyone that's committed to public safety in this town will be happy with the work we do. The other thing I just want to commit to is right now we're looking at who's going to be our research arm. We're thinking about a few different arms for that, but we anticipate putting out a report after the first year on what our metrics were. And with the people we got, with the compassion, with the experience level we have the student life director from Winnick on our team. We have folks who are very, very competent and qualified. I think we're going to surprise some folks.
Great,
Yeah.
thanks, Earl.
Thank you. Ash?
Yeah. Gosh, Earl, first, just thanks for being here. Just really, but it was a segue right into what I wanted to ask about the research thing. It seems, I mean, you've taken a stance which is pretty unusual in any public thing, and that is we are truly a learning group. We're going to use our feedback. Feedback loops are going to determine how we go. And it's going to be a constant process of learning, which is built in with the ongoing training. I actually call it the ongoing learning. And I think that one of the key things here is being able to have the time and the effort to document it well, so that you're learning about your learning. And that I think is too much of a burden to ask those who are on the ground to do all of that. However, working in teams is a really good way to do it, because one person kind of in a particular situation can be a recorder and the other not. But I having worked in experimental social change stuff like this, getting the process of learning and in being able to have it reported and reflected on and used, and then become a core part of what you call the evaluation is so key. So I'm hoping that there is a kind of a research group that can support you in doing that. And I wonder what the thought is on that.
Yeah, so we haven't settled on one, but a really good one is UMass. UMass does a lot of this sort of evaluation work. It's really important. If you know anybody looking for a job, there's still one chance to join CRESS right now. We have our implementation manager position posted, and that really is going to be their role, to work on evaluating the data, looking at debrief forms from incidents for policy opportunities. We recognize that we're doing this work for the town of Amherst. We're doing this for Amherst residents, but we have municipalities reaching out to us on an almost weekly basis at this point. Some of the larger ones in Eastern Mass. So we're also recognizing that it behooves all of us for this idea to grow. CRESS working in isolation, we'll be able to do the best we can, but the more minds thinking about this, the more towns invested in this, the better for all of us. So we're looking at the data from the point of, we want to prove our model, but I think, I just want to be honest that I think a big part of proving our model is going to be, how do you feel about it? How does it feel when folks hear CRESS? I don't want to underestimate the feeling, because I think the feeling is important, but looking at the data, looking at outcomes, looking at kind of result outcomes. One of the things I think is really important is that our handoffs won't just be, did you have one appointment? But making sure that people are happy with where they've been handed off to. For folks who aren't in the human service world, think of it as someone needs a therapist. The way the system currently works is, well, we get you a number to a therapist and you call, and if you're able to get an appointment, cool, right? Resolved. But what happens if that therapist doesn't work out for you? But now you're back at the beginning of the process, and therapists don't work out all the time, right? It's just the same reasons that you can't sit everybody in town in the same room and everyone will get along. Therapy is an intensely personal experience. So what we're saying is, hey, 3 contacts will make us feel like, hey, maybe this is sustainable, but also never closing the door on folks. But yeah, data is super important. Quality management is great. I'll tell you, for the implementation manager, we already have some really experienced folks there. And we're looking at quality management. Northampton has been incredibly generous. I think folks know that Northampton is building out a similar-ish program. It's pretty different in some big ways. It's a bit more public health focused. It's in their public health department. But one of the great things about the Northampton Public Health Department is they're amazing at data. And so we've started to have conversations with them about what tools are they using? What are they evaluating for? What are you hoping to do? How do you evaluate for multiple outcomes at the same time? And how do you evaluate for the 911 call stuff at the same time as the preventative stuff? If CRESS does our job well, we will bring down the 911 call volume in town, period, which might hurt our bottom line on the numbers, right? If we prevent the calls that we might have been able to handle. So we're looking at qualitative data and quantitative data. We want to hear the stories of people who are impacted by CRESS and make sure that the numbers don't sit in isolation. And really important for me is that one of the ways in which communities are discriminated against is research. Who is counted? Who is counted? So it's very important for us that these not the surveys, evaluations, not just be mailers, they not just be emails. That in some communities we need to go knock on the door. We need to go ask people what they feel. That people's familiarity with written thought versus kind of verbal thought. That we have folks who are in the community asking folks, and so I'm committed to that. It's one of the things I know is a way to really harm people is not including them in the data collection. So yeah, Ash, that's a great question. I'm in the weeds on that one, and folks are really helping us with that because Amherst is a particular town, and what CRESS being successful in South Amherst versus North Amherst versus downtown looks like may be really different, and we need to make sure that the data reflects the diversity of our communities. And that for folks who don't feel safe with kind of public safety for lots of reasons, things like immigration status, that we're still able to collect their thoughts in ways that don't harm them, but allow them meaningful voice at our table. I'm committed to that, even if it takes extra work.
Yeah. Thank you. And Brianna. Miss Brianna.
Hi, Earl. Hi, everyone. Earl, thank you so much for all your time and energy that you put into CRESS and just for meeting after hours. I feel like I see you a lot after 7. My question for you is, has CRESS started exploring policies around how they will handle situations where the PD arrives to an incident where CRESS responders have a better equipped skill set rather than now?
Yeah, again, I didn't pay Brianna. This is not, her and Kathleen just happened to help me out today. Actually, we spent a big part of today talking about that. How do we wave each other off? Because the opposite may be true too, right? That we show up in the PD or fire department think, hey, we got this in hand. How do we say, I got this? And how do we show up to a situation and say, hey, you may feel like you got this, but we really think we'd like a first go at it. So we're having conversations. Right now, those conversations really sit at the leadership level. They're happening between the chief, the captains, me, Kat Newman. But the thing I feel really comfortable with is that there is a path forward on that. I don't know exactly what it'll look like, but there is enough humility in both of our leadership teams that we're open to the idea that we may not always be the right folks. What we're really saying is, give us a chance, right? Give us a chance. And part of, having this unarmed thing is there may be situations that to folks who aren't doing the work, who haven't received our training, feel scary. I expect to work with people who are yelling. I expect to work with people who are pretty mad. I think that's important. At DMH, they used to joke that like if a person showed up to the building screaming, they were going to end up in my office. I think it's important. So we're setting that tone with folks. We're having a really transparent conversation. Part of it is I wanted to wait till the responders were here so that they could be a part of that conversation. One thing I haven't said is our responders are union employees, which was really, really important to us. So they also get representation in this conversation through collective bargaining and all of those things. So we are having that conversation, and I think we have a path forward. It's not going to be easy. There are concerns of liability that are very real, right? It's very real that the PD and the fire department are both worried that if they leave a scene and something bad happens, that they'll be held liable. And I can't promise them that won't happen. We're exploring those questions with folks like the DA, legislators. The reality is there is nothing in the law that makes space for CRESS. This is a town decision. So we are not covered by a lot of the large policies, and we're encouraging them to think about including us in those things, because part of what our concern is, we'll find a solution that really works, and then the legislator will propose a solution that's completely different, and we'll have to undo some good work. But I think they're committed to going forward, and and you know, I'm an optimist. I think everybody at the table is ready to get there, and I'll help them get there if they need it. Was that an acceptable answer, Brianna?
Yeah,
You
that
guys
was
should know Brianna has put in real work into this thing, and
Yes, she
I was on
has.
our implementation committee, and all the folks who were on that process, they don't get as much, I think, note, because those were kind of behind closed doors meetings. But one of the things I really appreciate about Brianna, and you know, I don't think she's the type to toot her own horn, so I will this time, is that she's incredibly thoughtful, and has this way of naming the issue that is, sometimes I have to go like, okay, well, let me sleep on it, because I didn't even think that was an issue, and now it feels like, and having Brianna be a part of our process was hugely important for me. And so I just want to thank you for the work you did. This is your baby too.
Thank you so much, Earl, and thank you for all your time and energy into CRESS and for your thoughtful answers in this conversation.
Thank you.
Okay, Alice, we're getting ready to sum up anyway. I know it's so much information. Thank you so much for answering the things that you could answer and being honest about the things that you can't answer, because this is very important. We want this to succeed. There's a lot of people in this town who really want this to succeed, and I believe that. I've talked to many people outside of like the League and the Racial Justice and JCA and other people that I know want these things to succeed, but there are other people on the outside that are looking in saying, well, maybe this will be it. Again, we know that we're gonna have hiccups and all kinds of things, but this was very, very helpful. And I think a lot of us, thank you to Judy, who just said that this is very helpful. And I think a lot of the people who asked questions and who came in and people who have worked to get you here, it was good to hear from Ms. Pat and from Brianna. And it really has been good, because watching this process and understanding how much it took to get there, and which is why I thank the counselors and of course the CSWG, of course, you know, but that's why I was saying thank you to them, because we want this to succeed.
And let me just thank the League of Women Voters, because that event at Groff Park, I don't think you all will ever know how helpful that was. There are two responders
Well, we were
on
very
our team.
happy with it
There are
too.
two responders you all will be very proud of, who we would have never met if it wasn't for that day. So you have directly impacted the ability for us to go.
It's good to hear those good things, because that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to stir up, we're trying to make things better. I mean, and that's part of what, you know, what we are about. Marcy, you had announcements to make.
Yes, I do.
And don't let me forget to tell everybody about, don't just leave, you know, fill out a little form that we have for you. Go on.
Okay. So first of all, Earl, I just adore you. You know that already. And thank you so much. You are like opening a window and just a whole bunch of fresh air coming into the town of Amherst. And we are really, really grateful, very excited. Okay, one thing is that August 25th, Andrea has arranged for Amherst Media to come and do a program for us about all that's changing there and what's going on. I think it's in the evening, but
yes,
stay
I
tuned.
think it is.
So
I
probably
think
7 p.m. on August 25th. Second of all, you all probably know about this, but the League of Women Voters of Amherst is doing a very big book sale. And that's coming up for the last weekend in July and the first weekend in August. So if you have any time and you feel like going and sorting some books, they would love that. And otherwise go buy some when the sale is happening. And third, David Williams, who's a big part of the RJC, he planted a seed for me that I would like to just start a little ritual at the end of these programs, which is to remind people that the League's, one of our main missions is about voting. And that, you know, we aren't in a voting cycle right now, except for the sheriff's race. But, you know, we should always keep in mind that it's really great if you know 18-year-olds, make sure that they're registered. If you know people that are new citizens or in some way might not be registered, when it does come time to have an election, to help folks get to the polls, we just really have to keep this voting thing alive because as David would say, that's like the pulse of what's going on in the country as a whole. And we, even though we're in Amherst and we're all cool and, you know, vote and all that, we still need to keep our eye on that
A
price.
lot of people in Amherst need to vote. 'Cause
Yeah,
that is-
exactly.
you would be
We don't have
surprised
that
some of the
high.
lo- Right, our
Yeah,
numbers are
yeah.
not that high.
Anyway, those were my 3 things. Thank you, Andrea, so much for
Okay.
moderating and
And Earl, really, it was wonderful. Thank you. I think a lot of people got a lot out of it. But one thing I'm going to ask people to do, when you leave, there's going to be a little survey, quick survey. Just take it and then go on and have a wonderful evening. And we thank our guest speaker. I'm sure we'll be talking with you and seeing you at various other things, as I know you're one of those hands-on people. And I'm wishing all the first responders and all the police and the fire department, et cetera, I'm wishing all of us success, because our success will be the success of this town and many, many people, and also the success of other towns, because that's where they get it from. And, you know, I'd heard of the program because of the successes. You know, the fact that police department calls went down 80% in places like Denver and stuff. I mean, it was really very exciting when I first heard about this. So there are a lot of us that are welcoming and hoping and anything that most of us and people here who came, I appreciate the people who came out. And I'm going to ask you to say goodbye to Earl, and we will be seeing you around town, I know. And please don't forget to fill out the form before you leave. Thank you so much for everything and all the good questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Earl. You're
Take
awesome.
care. Thank you, Marcy. Thank you, Andrew. You guys are great. Have a great rest of the night.
Okay, have a good evening. Go and relax.
I'm
Yeah.
about to. Take care.
Okay.
Thank you.
All righty.